What do you think will happen with China? Do you think they will reverse their decision? Because I think it's widely seen that banning Bitcoin mining could prove to be one of the most biggest geopolitical mistakes in history.
No.
But do you, like, Danny, who said it this week?
Barry Silbert said he thought 2022 China had unbanned Bitcoin. I mean, he did clarify that it was just a guess.
I would take the other side of that.
Okay.
I think that, China's foreign policy is a lot more subtle than America's, to say the least.
Mildly.
But China has like a very, very long history of using attraction rather than coercion with its international policy. What we are seeing China do is roll out the Belt and Road Initiative, in part as a way to build better relationships with like resource-rich nations and emerging markets, but also to internationalize the renminbi and in turn Xi Jinping's sort of rule of law. Bitcoin is a direct threat to that. Right now, China can go to, like, Jack Muller's like talk for the IMF. Like,
Yeah.
Did you end up watching the video?
The
actual video.
Yeah,
So what he talks about is how, so many people, like, we always say like, oh, it takes 3 days to settle a legacy payment with like Swift or Fedwire. It's like, well, that's if you're lucky, right? One of the things that Jack gets into is how correspondent banking has declined 20% over the last decade, with those declines concentrated in Africa, in Latin America, in a lot of the countries that sort of need it the most. Those are the countries where Bitcoin adoption is rising the fastest. And those are also the countries where China is engaging in all of these dollar-denominated lending agreements in. And so in many ways, China, it's a sales pitch. Like, China has the perfect sales pitch for their CBDC right now, because they can say, hey, you're actually, like, look at the West. They're failing you. These banking relationships are going away and you need to conduct cross-border payments. Use our digital yuan. And if the choice is between the legacy system and the Chinese central bank digital currency, those people are going to pick the Chinese CBDC every single time, even if it means like privacy trade-offs. Then enter Bitcoin. If the choice is between Bitcoin or DCEP, the renminbi, digital yuan, whatever, well, it's a clear choice. Why would I want to use a Chinese currency when I could use Bitcoin?
Unless you get a massive loan from the Chinese government.
Yeah. So no, I think they're not going to unban Bitcoin, both because they're concerned about capital controls and they want to manage and control the flow of capital domestically. But Bitcoin is a perfect solution to Xi Jinping's plan to internationalize the usage of the renminbi. And the implications of that are just so profound. In the same way that the West has leveraged its monopoly over the financial system to sort of shape the international system to its views and its liking, China is trying to do the exact same, right? If you and I were paying each other and one of us was interacting with DCEP, Xi Jinping could say, oh yeah, that's subversive to the state, that's terrorism, and then stop that transaction from happening or seize that person's money, even if it's happening outside of the mainland China. They recognize how important this tool is. Like, if you control the rails of finance, you control the world. And Bitcoin, kind of like Balaji was tweeting about this, like how Bitcoin, and I don't know if he said non-aligned movement exactly, but something that's been on my mind is, yeah, Bitcoin allows people to make the choice to not be controlled by America, but also to not have to go in turn be controlled by an authoritarian regime. So at the point where Bitcoin is the perfect solution to so many of the problems with the legacy payment system, especially in emerging markets, China has a very, very strong incentive to hate it and to not want it to spread.
But do you not think on a long enough time frame they still have to concede if Bitcoin wins?
Yes.
When Bitcoin wins?
When Bitcoin wins, I don't know. I just like I have no idea. What I do know is that, like, I think they have very strong reasons to not support Bitcoin. I don't know when, if ever, they kind of realize like, oh shit, we're not going to be able to replicate what the West did, because that's what they thought they could do, right? So post Bretton Woods, the IMF is operating for decades, and if you ever looked at like some of the term sheets of like IMF like rescue packages, the average number of conditionalities from like 1970 conditionalities being sort of arbitrary actions that the receiving state has to do in exchange for this IMF loan, it's like 430. Like 430 different things that you had to do before the IMF would give you money.
Like, give some examples.
Austerity, sort of slash social spending. I mean, in Brazil, like one of the conditionalities I remember reading was like building soccer fields. It's just random stuff. But the point is, when you're the only game in town, you're the only people that can give a nation state level loan. You have a tremendous amount of leverage. So what does China do? They build parallel institutions. So in 2015, I think it's 2015, they launched the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is kind of trying to do the exact same thing as the IMF, with the exception that there are no conditionalities, at least not up front. They're more subtle. It's like, through like BRI lending, it's like, we'll build you this railroad. You'll pay us back in like 20 years. But if you can't pay for it, and by the way, we are going to structure this agreement so that you won't be able to pay for it. Don't sweat it. You can just like give us your oil, or you can just give us your cobalt mines.
We'll take your port.
We'll take your port. But once China started doing the same thing as America, except no strings attached, IMF conditionalities got massively eviscerated. I think now the average number of conditionalities on an IMF loan is like in the 30s or 40s. And frankly, Bitcoin, and so yeah, like, what China's strategy is doing makes sense, because they're like, we're creating this market competition to this monopoly that is America, and we're going to be more attractive to the consumer, and we're going to take this power that America has built. What they don't understand is that Bitcoin is doing the same thing, but it's better than both of them. And so in the world with Bitcoin, people have to ask themselves, is this Chinese currency better than Bitcoin? And they're always going to say no. If in a world without Bitcoin, they're just going to ask, is this Chinese currency, digital currency, better than what I'm using now? The answer is probably going to be yes. So Bitcoin just kind of played the same game that China is trying to, but earlier and better. And I don't think China's quite realized that.